Johnny.
You're still afraid.
Stop it now. I mean it.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're acting like a child.
Look, there comes one of them now. Comes now. I'm getting out of here.
Johnny. Oh, no!
Welcome to 75 Vintage On Demand.
Welcome to 75 Vintage On Demand, where we look beyond the plot to uncover the psychology, behavior, and hidden messages behind the movies we love. And if this is your first time here, I'm Vintage. Welcome. And if you enjoy thoughtful movie analysis that challenge the way you see familiar films, you're in the right place. Today, we're going all the way back to 1968 to a little black and white horror movie that changed the genre forever, Night of the Living Dead. Most people remember it as the movie that helped create the modern zombie, and we're going to talk about that. But I think there's another reason this movie still works nearly 60 years later. This movie is older than I am, because the zombies aren't actually the most interesting thing happening. The people are. Put a group of strangers inside a house, surround them with an enemy they don't understand, remove their sense of safety, and watch what happens. Some people lead, some freeze, some fight, some deny reality completely, and some become so determined to prove they're right that being right becomes more important than surviving. And standing in the middle of all of that is Ben, a black man in 1968 who becomes the smartest, strongest, and most capable person in the room. So we're going to look at Night of the Living Dead in two parts. First, Ben, the first black horror hero, and then everybody else. Because this movie isn't only about the living dead, it's about what happens to the living when they're terrified. Spoiler warning right now. We're discussing the entire movie, including that unforgettable ending. So let's get inside the farmhouse. When people talk about black representation in horror, they usually mention films like Candyman, Get Out, or more recently, The Backrooms. But decades before any of those movies, one man quietly rewrote the rules of horror. His name was Ben. He wasn't the comic relief in the movie. He wasn't the expendable friend. He wasn't there to die first. He was the smartest person in the room. No questions about that. He was the strongest leader, the one everyone depended on, even if they refused to admit it. And that's what makes Night of the Living Dead remarkable. Because beneath the zombies, George A. Romero may have created one of the most important social commentaries in American cinema. To understand Ben, you have to understand America. 1968 wasn't just another year. It was one of the most volatile periods in modern American history. The Vietnam War, civil unrest, protests, political assassinations. Assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Families were divided. The country itself was divided. Sound familiar? Seems like we're repeating it a little bit. Then came a low-budget independent horror movie about strangers trapped inside a farmhouse who couldn't stop fighting each other, even while the dead gathered outside. Sound familiar? Ben is the only adult in the room. The zombies aren't the biggest threat. The people inside the house are. Notice something? Ben arrives, takes inventory, boards up the windows, creates a plan, assigns responsibilities, and adapts when circumstances change. That is true leadership. Everything a competent leader should do. Harry Cooper does the opposite. He argues, complains, challenges authority, creates conflict. Every decision Harry makes places everyone at greater risk. Ben isn't heroic because he kills zombies. He's heroic because he remains rational while everyone else lets fear make their decisions for them. Leadership has nothing to do with race. One of the most remarkable things about Romero's film is what it doesn't say. Ben's race is almost never discussed. No character openly questions his authority because he's black. Instead, the film allows Ben to earn respect through his actions. That's important because audiences in 1968 couldn't ignore what they were seeing. A black man leading white characters, making the best decisions, while authority repeatedly fails. Whether Romero intended to or not, the image spoke for itself. Now, let me ask you something. If you were trapped inside that farmhouse, who would you trust to keep you alive? Ben, Harry, Cooper, or someone else? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read and reply to every one of them. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into horror history, I'd really appreciate if you like the video and subscribe. It helps more people discover 75 Vintage on Demand and supports thoughtful conversations like this one. Now, let's talk about the ending. I think this got to be the most devastating ending in horror history. Ben survives the night. Think about that. After everything, the zombies, the panic, the infighting, Ben wins, or at least we think he does. Morning comes. A posse arrives. They scan the landscape. Someone sees movement through a window. A rifle fires. One shot. Ben is dead. No warning, no conversation, no attempt to identify him, just another body. Then comes the sequence that still shocks audiences today. Hooks dragging bodies of funeral pyre. Photographs that resemble real newspaper images from the civil rights era. It's impossible to watch without feeling the weight of history. So, who is the real monster? That's the question. The movie quietly asks us. Were the zombies ever the real villains? The undead act according to instinct. Humans choose fear, choose distrust, they choose violence. The farmhouse becomes a miniature America. Everyone is trapped together. Everyone faces the same threat. But instead of cooperating, they destroy one another. I feel like history is repeating itself in America. The zombies merely finished what human conflict began. Now, Ben changed horror forever. Before Ben, black characters in horror rarely occupied the center of the story. After Ben, the genre slowly began expanding what black protagonists could be. Not stereotypes, not side characters, but leaders, survivors, heroes. His influence stretches far beyond Romero's film. Without Ben, it's difficult to imagine characters like Roger in Night of the Demons, or Chris Washington in Get Out, or the ensemble of The Blackening. Each represents a different stage in the evolution of black representation in horror. And these are my final thoughts. Most people remember Night of the Living Dead as the movie that created the modern zombie. And that's true, but it also did something else. It quietly introduced audiences to one of cinema's first black horror heroes. A man defined not by his race, but by his character, his intelligence, his courage, his willingness to lead when no one else could. And then In one heartbreaking moment, the film reminds us that surviving monsters doesn't always mean surviving society. That's why Night of the Living Dead still matters nearly 60 years later. Not because of the zombies, but because Ben's story continues to ask a question that's just as relevant today as it was in 1968. And that's this: what happens when the most capable person in the room is the one the world is least prepared to recognize? Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones trying to get inside the house. They're the ones waiting outside when the sun comes up. And if you've watched this all the way until the end, thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you at the movies. Bye.